Welcome to Radio Dante podcast, Keith. I'm really pleased
nice to be here.
that you can join us. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, let me tell you that Radio Dante podcast is a trilingual podcast programs. We're based in Cambridge and we promote language and culture in 3 languages, Italian, Spanish and English. And this podcast is dedicated to solutions for teachers for CLIL, content language integrated learning. And Keith, I know you are an expert. So let me introduce the listeners to understand who you are. So you are founder of FactWorld, the global network of 3,500 CLIL teachers. You're also an author, an active author for books by Macmillan and OUP, Oxford University Press. And we are here just to have a little discussion regarding solutions, challenges the CLIL teachers have in teaching the language. So my first question is actually, why is CLIL so important these days, Keith?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What makes it so important? It sounds like a broad general thing, but actually for me, the specifics are really what makes it important. And that's namely, CLIL is about learners learning language while doing something else. And I think that's specifically why it's so important. It brings children to the classroom and they learn a foreign language while learning something else. And that's very general, but if you put it in terms of the primary curriculum, they're learning primary science and developing English at the same time. And that's important today because a lot of children are coming to school already with language skills. And so CLIL I think it's a natural part of that development, offering children the opportunity to learn in ways that they are similar to the ways that they are picking up language outside the school. In fact, the methodology is all about exploring that natural interface between the dynamic, the activity, and the content and the language. And I particularly think that's the heart of CLIL in terms of pedagogy. It's if you get the dynamics right, if you get the procedures right, the content and the language come along with it. It's also, I think, part of a move, just to finish that thought, it's also part of a move away from filling the heads of young learners with facts to equipping them with skills to be able to act, explore, ask questions all for themselves. I think CLIL's part of that process as well.
Exactly. And as I understand, you have a primary school in Bulgaria. And I guess your theory and practice go together. There's a wonderful marriage. Tell me how this happened. How did you have the idea of bring up this school in Bulgaria, and whether you actually use CLIL technique in your school?
Yeah, we do. It's called Anglia School. And I set it up with my best man and his family, in partnership with my best man and his partner, because their daughter was the same age as my daughter, the age of 4. They were both in a nursery, and it was warm, loving, clean, and very caring. But I felt that they could do a lot more imaginative stuff with the children, without wanting to sound very critical of that particular school. They didn't paint very much, and so Anglia School was set up really with that context in mind, creating a learning environment for my own daughter and a very good friend's daughter. And it grew from there. We created initially a thematic curriculum that worked, for example, with the seasons, with the festivals, with the natural school calendar, and we developed weekly themes throughout the year in a traditional kind of UK nursery sort of way. But that's changed since we opened nearly 11 years ago now, it's moved away from this sort of thematic approach. We still have these themes, but I can see now my growth in my own CLIL journey is affecting how we do things in the school, because I'm trying to get my colleagues to develop skills, not really think about the themes and the lexis as, although that's important, of course it is, but try to bring out more some of the curriculum skills and bring them to the foreground, without sacrificing the lexis and the content. But we do a heck of a lot of observation work, investigation work, experimentation work with our very youngest children. So to answer your question, it was really a need personally I saw with my own daughter, and she went very happily through Anglia School for about 4 years, complementing what she was doing in the state system here. And it grew from there. We grew from a nursery through juniors. We had teens and adults as well. So it's not just primary. We use, I call it a soft CLIL school, because we tend to find the content that allows us to develop the procedural skills on the one hand, like I've just said with the nursery children, through investigation, exploration and observation, for example, numeracy skills as well. But even with the adults, we set up a photography English course. I've done plenty of cooking activities as well throughout the ages. And all of that is tied together through these themes that go out throughout our year. Originally, I stole the idea from the Tweenies, which was a TV program set in a nursery in the UK with life-size puppets. So life-size costumed people playing the roles of children aged 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 with some adults. And they had a clock, an activity clock, which they spun, and where it stopped, that's what they did next. And it had story, music, song, dance, and a whole bunch of other things. And that clock is still on our Anglia School website.
Yeah, that makes me very, very happy to hear, because this is exactly how we do things at Dante in Cambridge. We're based in Cambridge, as we know. And for those who don't know me, I'm Giulia, the director and founder. And I'm so glad to hear that, because that's exactly how La Dante was born. It was because of my children. I wanted them to grow up bilingually in Cambridge. With all due respect, there wasn't a school that was up at the standard I wanted. So I created this children courses. I'm really pleased that we did an awful lot of cooking courses. We did even small botanic lessons, growing plants, building up the vocabulary like that. And it has been like this all across the languages. We teach languages like that for children. Italian, Spanish, and English, we use this type of techniques, and I have to say that it works through practice, and with adults as well. We do practical things. Cooking is fun, working really well, but we do other things as well, which is really good. But let me move on to the challenges that the teachers face these days when they teach CLIL, because there is an awful lot of theory out there, lots of books. We do have published materials by CLIL, the Cambridge University Press publication. It's really popular, Putting CLIL into Practice, Oxford University Press. But in the way I see the publications, there is an awful lot of theory, but still the teachers have got this incredible task of applying the theory into practice. And in fact, we're going to have a CLIL course with you and Mary Spratt at the end of June, beginning of July, with these lovely teachers from Spain. And we're actually going to work on this. So we're going to work on how to form the how to apply the theory to the curriculum. You're not going to spoon feed them because they are the experts in the subjects, but how can we facilitate these for the majority of teachers who want to apply theory in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? And of course, time is a major constraint, and the teachers we'll be working with, if I remember correctly, they're looking at 2 lessons of 30 minutes each a week for CLIL only. And what that can do, it can tend to compartmentalize CLIL in a way which leaves it simply looking at a bunch of words in a topic each lesson. And it's quite difficult to look sequentially at the bigger picture, which is what you really need to do. You know, if you're going to develop any skills, you can't really do them piecemeal. It has to be cyclical. So that's the main challenge, I think, is to break open this sort of the binds of you know, a 30-minute CLIL sort of experience into a more curriculum planned sequence of cyclical skills development, which bring content and language with it. I mean, I run courses here too through Erasmus in my school, and each course we've done has incorporated materials writing, and that's very ambitious. You can imagine, with nursery teachers and primary teachers, sometimes not completely confident in their own language levels in English, but nevertheless we produce them as a collection, and this comes out in our fact journal, the Forum for Cross-Curriculum Teaching, and we're on our 3rd now. I'm currently editing a collection for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we did primary CLIL during the course. We did the basics. We looked at guiding teachers through input and supporting teachers with their children through output, so speaking and writing. We looked at language. We looked at levels of language. We did all the basics CLIL things, which I will do with the colleagues from Spain. But still, we still need to look at, you know, what is the end product for the teachers and the learners. And my advice to those colleagues who feel time constrained is try to look at the bigger picture and think of the whole thing as a project rather than lesson by lesson, which can be just themed, and you have a bunch of words, some songs, some story. Try and look at what skill. I come back to skills. What skills you can develop over 4 meetings or over a month of meetings, and plan that into a larger picture, a larger timeline, because that's where really I think the secret of CLIL lies, and gets it away from a position which is criticized quite a lot. I think that, you know, from the other colleagues in the language learning world who look at CLIL, and they do criticize CLIL for being too focused on content topics for developing vocabulary. And I think looking at skills gets away from that. So you can do 2 things by looking at skills. You plan your time constrained 30 minutes into longer blocks. So that's what I will be doing with the colleagues from Spain within the themes that they're working on, having a look at what the skills are that can be recycled through the lessons.
And I think it would be a great experience also because they will consolidate, it's actually consolidate the thinking, you know, the strategy, the methodology, that put together the theory into practice, but also what we're offering at Dante is also shadowing opportunity in October, November, which is going to be really, really good for them. And they're going to be in 2 schools in Cambridge, and they're going to do some shadowing. So I hope they will get the best out of this experience. But let me tell you another thing. My sister actually teaches Italian and history in a lyceum. So 14 to 18-year-olds in Italy. And I was really impressed on how she taught history in English. So she was working together with an English teacher. They decided to do a period of history. And I was really pleased to hear that the way she developed the CLIL function was by giving the lecture course together with the English teacher. They built up the vocabulary, and then they had boxes. They had creative boxes. So she divided the groups, small groups of students, and for instance, because it was Second World War, in a box there was Mussolini, and then his lover, and the name of his lover, and there was in fact a sign of that recalled the last days. So the teenagers had to put together the little story that was reminded them of the last days of Mussolini. And I thought it was really creative, because then they had to expose, they had to discuss, that it was creative. It was building up a lot of vocabulary, sentencing and everything. So for secondary schools as well, is really, really good. So it's quite creative, actually, the way CLIL can be adapted with different kind of theories. A few years ago, prior to the pandemic, we did have secondary teachers, actually, and we had a good week of full time, and that was really good. And again, it was a lot to work from the teachers, a lot to mystifying the fear of applying CLIL, because some people actually think, oh my goodness, how am I going to do it? How am I going to apply to this? And in terms of teaching resources, so what would you say is the best thing, where they can get some of the resources they can use for the teaching?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? There are publications for curriculum publishers like Cambridge and OUP and Macmillan. They do produce books for teachers aimed at providing CLIL material for their subject teaching through English as a foreign language. But the challenge there is that the one curriculum area in one country can differ greatly, particularly with regard to history, for example, because it's so, if you like, culture-centered in one place. The textbooks can be very different. So publishers tend not to produce specific materials, which is what teachers need, because their curriculum demands are very specific. So I think that what teachers can do is find native speaker books that, if they visit charity shops in the UK, there are lots around. They get recycled through charity shops every year from GCSE and A-level course books. But then there's a lot of work to do there for the teachers. They have to be adapted. There are also a lot of ideas books. I always share about Watkin Jones books for Penguin, which are creative grammar practice and the creative vocabulary practice, and those are A4 photocopiable pages. Which, if you look at how those resources are made, generically for English language lessons, not for CLIL, you can take the structure of the activity and apply them to history or geography, for example. And that's what I tend to do with teachers on courses, is to get them to look at tools and instruments for communication through their subjects. But it's difficult. Anybody taking on CLIL is going to take on more work, by default, because it's about doing things differently. And history, for example, your sister sounds like she's looking at how the content is structured and use that structure for communication. And I think that's the way to do it. You have to identify the concept.
Children do respond. Children and teenagers respond really well to this technique. It's worth the effort, and it's worth each country, of course, has got a different way of applying it, because of course also the terms of hours is different. I mean, in Italy, they started using CLIL at primary schools only in some of them, and CLIL in private linguistic museums, usually they use it, but it's a lot more used in Spain. How is the situation in Bulgaria? Do they
there's a lot of teaching of the curriculum through foreign languages, but Bulgaria is quite a special context because they've been doing it here since the 1960s very immersively. Used to be mainly French and Russian, and now there's more English. But I wouldn't really call it CLIL as much as immersive education in the language and specialized grammar schools. Young secondary students come, for example, in the language grammar schools in Bulgaria, the children get 20 lessons a week of foreign language for a whole year.
That's incredible. Remarkable.
There's no other country in the world that does that, Julie.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So those language grammar schools and specialized grammar schools like math schools offer very intensive language preparation. And then in the next year, depending on what teachers they've got, they will offer, say, geography or history or other subjects through English or other languages. My daughter's in a German language grammar school at the moment doing these 20 hours, but it's very traditional. Lots of vocabulary lists, lots of purely grammatical lessons, and not so much practice, to be honest.
Yes, unfortunately, there is an awful lot of improvement that is needed, even in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a shame, really, isn't it? Because the practice drags everything else with it, I think.
Yeah.
If you do without the practical element, you devalue the lexis and the grammar.
Indeed, I agree with you. And it's regretful that in England, for instance, that languages are not compulsory anymore at the age of 14 at GCSE.
Right. Yeah.
And that is quite sad, really, because there is a need. There is certainly a need in improving
more than ever.
Skills, more than ever, with competition as well. And I think quite a lot of parents do realize that. But listen, Keith, I'm conscious of time, and
sure.
I would like to wrap up just now and say a big thank you for your contribution.
It's a pleasure, really.
Radio Dante listeners. I'm sure people will appreciate hearing from you and having tips and solutions to these big questions like CLIL. We are going to record and publish this podcast on radiodante.org, but it's also going to be in social media. And for our listeners, certainly please log in on radiodante.org or ladante.org on our social media as well, and you can listen to the podcast in the next few days. So thank you so much, and I do appreciate it, Keith.